Good evening. I'm David Watts Jr. and welcome to this month's Town Administrators Report. With me is our Town Administrator, Steve Mayo. Steve, welcome.
Thank you, David. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Getting there.
Yeah, we survived regular town meeting.
We did. Yeah.
It was for the day a pretty good turnout.
Yeah, not bad. There really wasn't a very controversial article there. So, that controversy is what brings out the numbers, as we know from experience.
Oh, yes.
There was nothing that was a debt exclusion or an override. So, taxes increasing brings out the numbers. So, no, I thought it went very well. Engaged people. We had, a lot of questions and, close another year. And now we're back into mode for fiscal year 23. No, it doesn't end.
We're 7 months away from that, and already we have to think about it.
Already we have to prepare for it, yeah.
Yep.
We'll be starting budgets in another month, so at least the presentation of them.
And actually, speaking of budgets, we're going to be talking about money this month, but we're going to be talking about the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, which was signed into law by President Biden back in March.
Yes.
And this is the $1.9 trillion economic stimulus bill intended to speed up the nation's recovery from the effects of COVID, both economic and health, and the resulting and ongoing recession that has come about because of it. And this comes on the heels of two previous acts, the CARES Act, March 2020, and the Consolidated Appropriations Act of December 2020. But the difference here is that this one is designed to touch upon nearly every aspect of American life that has been seriously impacted by COVID-19 over the last 21 months. It's hard to believe we're almost 2 years.
I know,
into
it
this.
is. I was thinking about that the other day, trying to think, what Thanksgiving was that we couldn't get together? I mean, it was really crazy. But, this was signed in March 11th of the spring, as you mentioned. And this is for expenses for March 3rd of 2021 going forward. So any expenditures backwards, we really weren't able to use this money for, although there is one area where you could, and I'll talk about that as we go on. But this is really for expenses going forward. And what's interesting about this is that you have 3 years to spend the money, where the CARES Act was kind of very more consolidated. You needed to spend that right away. And that was to get through the pandemic.
Right.
This kind of is to get beyond the pandemic, as you mentioned. So, the costs must be either all spent and incurred or at least obligated by December 31st, the year 2024.
Now, for people who aren't maybe as up on this sort of language as the folks who are actually running the show in town,
Let's hope
what do you
so.
mean by obligated?
Well, I think, incurred is easy, like we spent it. We needed books for learning loss. We spent the money on the books. They're here. They're not. So that's easy, right? Spent it, done. No. So obligated may be. We found that during the pandemic, outdoor spaces were really prevalently used. It really helped restaurants and businesses recover. We're going to do a outdoor parklet in Greenwood, Wakefield, and we've designed it, and it's going to cost us. We've gone out to bid. It's going to cost us, $500,000. It won't be built until, December of 2025. But we have obligated the funds, so we've kind of signed the contract to do it, sort of thing. So it's been encumbered for a purpose.
So we're committed to
We're committed to it. Committed is a better word. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And the funds are received directly from the U.S. Treasury. There's no middleman.
No, it's a little bit, that was what it was supposed to be. There has been a little bit of a middleman. So I'll kind of explain that. So under the CARES Act, kind of looked at the CARES Act like we look at a force account. We have a vernacular in our business, we call it a force account. You spend the money out of your own pocket, and then you get it reimbursed by another another entity, so maybe they're forced to replenish you. So the CARES Act is a little different. We were supposed to get the money directly from the U.S. Treasury, okay? And then we were to kind of segregate it and then spend down on it, and then we would be audited and will be audited by the U.S. Treasury for years to come to make sure we spent it on what was allowed. And we'll get into that in a little while. So, but instead of this money coming directly to every city and town, it actually did flow through the state, which is fine. So we actually ended up getting the money from the state. So there was a little bit of a middleman. And, Wakefield had a direct amount that was, and I think it was a per dollar amount per person, okay, that went to Wakefield. And there was also money for the county, Middlesex County. So Middlesex County being a county that really doesn't, I'm not going to say doesn't do much, but it doesn't do much. But you know what I mean. There isn't a county fire department. There isn't a county sheriff.
The county system is different in New England than it is in the Midwest.
In the Midwest, rest of the country,
Right.
down south, Pennsylvania.
Right.
So, we have a Wakefield Fire Department. Down Florida, there might be a Broward County Fire Department.
Right.
So for Wakefield, we got a direct Wakefield grant or money of, $2.8 million. Our county share was $5.2 million. So our total was a little over $8 million. So so we were supposed to get all of this money. Okay, we have received half. And that half is sitting, we're going to figure out what we're going to do with it. But it's sitting in an earmarked, a separate account that is separate from our free cash, separate from our stabilization, separate from our tax payments as they come in. It's a segregated account that we will draw against. So the difference with this account versus a lot of financial mumbo jumbo today, then the CARES Act, we actually spent the money. We bought masks. We had vaccine clinics. We bought sanitizing materials, and then we were reimbursed for the money we spent. Here, we have the money already in a pot. We'll use it, and then we'll get audited later on. So it's a little bit of a different dynamic. The nice thing about the CARES Act, the first act, was we got all those expenditures approved before we spent them, and even then. Sometime the state came back and said, "Well, really, did we approve that?" "Well, yeah, you did. Here's the chain where you approved that generator." "Oh, okay, all right, okay, now we see that." So this will be interesting.
Yeah, because hopefully they'll write the check after the fact. So, allowable uses. Let's talk specifically about Wakefield. What allowable uses are we looking at to spend this money?
Right. Well, I think the American Rescue Plan Act, it really breaks it down into 5 kind of sectors, right? 4 or 5 sectors. One is public health spending. That's kind of, you can think about what that might be. Ongoing issues with the pandemic, including mental health issues that maybe occurred from the pandemic. Economic impacts of the public health emergency. That's very broad. Very, very broad. Businesses that didn't do well, businesses that were failing, nonprofits that weren't able to handle things because of that. So there's a way that we can buck things up over there. So that's an area. One area, and that's very broad ranging, and we'll probably break them down. Infrastructure, another huge one, and we'll talk about that. That could be sidewalks, creating connectivity to certain areas, to roadways, to what have you. So that's an interesting dynamic there too. Lost public sector revenue, and let's talk about this. I was kind of excited about this when it came in, because boy, we don't have to do too much other than to say, hey, our hotel and meals tax, we projected would be, $1 million a year.
Right.
It came in at, half that. So here's $500,000 that I can really point to. This was a lost revenue source. I can take that $500,000. It's very easy mathematically, and put that in our treasury, And then we can decide, without any of this December 31st, 2024, or fitting any other category
Sure.
to take care of. Well, here was the kicker on this.
There's always a
There's
kicker.
always a kicker. They looked at the entire picture, revenue picture of the town. And when you think about a town like Wakefield, where most of our revenue is real estate taxes, and those were mostly collected, 99.99%. And we actually did very well. We exceeded all our expectations in other revenue. So there's no revenue lost to make up. So we'll take that right off the board. Another area was premium pay for essential workers. So when you look at those, 5 buckets, how do you fit projects into those buckets?
Yeah.
What should we do as a community? And we'll kind of delve into that as we get going, I guess.
So, one of the big conversations at this last town meeting and town meetings previously in recent years has been infrastructure, has been roads, and the condition of roads in Wakefield. Will this help to speed up that
Yeah,
process?
I'm going to say yes with a big asterisk against it, and this is why. Along with the ARPA funds, okay, there is another boatload of federal money that could eventually trickle down. It was just signed by the president last week.
Oh, the infrastructure.
The infrastructure bill.
Yeah.
So one of what we tried to do during the CARES funds was to say, you know what, let's be very strategic with how we spend this money. Let's not use CARES funds for something that we could get from another bucket. School department did a great job on that, going through separately designated educational pots. ESSER, and I forget what ESSER stands for, but educational something, whatever it was. A lot of money came from there, and then we supplemented that with CARES. We used a lot of FEMA funds for a lot of the items during COVID, the throes of COVID, and then backfilled that with CARES. So it's kind of the same thing we're doing now with this infrastructure bill. What are we going to get from infrastructure from the federal government? What can I then, dovetail with CARES so I can get, 2 bites at the apple, so to speak? Kind of the problem with that is that while we're doing that here, or Wakefield's doing that, the state is also doing that because they got a lot of ARPA money too.
Of course.
And they're kind of holding that close to the vest because they have infrastructure money coming. So are they going to flow some infrastructure money from the 1.7 trillion to this versus ARPA? But to make a long story short, I think roads, sidewalks, connectivity between neighborhoods and businesses, particularly businesses that were disproportionately affected by the pandemic. So you think about businesses like, let's say about the Albion Street corridor, for instance. Albion Street, there are a lot of service-type businesses. There are a lot of women-owned businesses on Albion Street. Those were very hard hit during the pandemic.
Sure.
Because you couldn't go to them.
Sure.
Period.
Yeah.
So we have a kind of a disproportionate, factor there. Can we and will we, and I think the answer is yes and yes, kind of use some of these ARPA funds to create connectivity, particularly multimodal, biking, walking, from other areas of town to get there. And I think that's something we're really going to be looking at. That avenue, that area, as well as downtown Wakefield, Main Street proper, think about
Sure.
it, is very close to the lake. Could a little bit more connectivity be done with the lake? Maybe a nicer, I'll use the word boardwalk, my term, but not,
Right.
for especially on North Ave, that's not the greatest walking route, North Ave. The rest of the lake is a little bit better. That there could be something along the lake closer, a boardwalk going on the shore, coming around, and connecting then to the neighborhoods. Sidewalks. part of North Ave has no sidewalks, okay? The west side of North Ave
Right.
doesn't have a lot of sidewalks. That would be great to help that connectivity. So those are the things we're thinking about. That and outdoor spaces. I mean, outdoor public spaces. We certainly found that the outdoor dining did wonders for restaurants. And I get it, there was, some grumbling about lack of parking, but I don't think that really mattered in the end. I think people were walking, they were around. People found a way to get there. Maybe, we need to be more creative with shuttles and things like that we talk about. So those are kind of things that really, to a long way to answer your infrastructure question, yes, and complete with doing the roads, and complete with shared lanes for bikes where we can't do a separate lane. Sidewalks that work better, handicapped accessible sidewalks, because they all aren't. So yes, and all of that section, yes, I'm saying yes, that will help speed that up. Long way to get to yes.
Another one is modernization of cybersecurity.
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge modernization of cybersecurity as well as accessibility of broadband and what have you. So this is an area that has been specifically mentioned again in both bills, really. So this is something that we really will take a look at. Should we have, when you go to some of these European cities, you have the, Palermo, Sicily, the Palermo broadband, it pops up on your phone there and bang, you get on it and you get into all of their issues. Is that something that would really help people as they work from home, people that don't have good Wi-Fi in their home, so they can't work from home. Maybe they could be helped by, working in the downtown and what have you. So those are things to be looking at, as well as, keeping that secure, keeping the town more secure. We must stop thousands of intruders a day on the town website. It's amazing when you look at some of the, and we're still not doing enough.
Right.
So I think that is a big issue that a lot of businesses are looking at, because as we become more remote, as people are working farther from home, particularly, if you're my town accountant, he can probably work from home pretty good most days. And he comes into the office every day. I don't mean to pick on Kevin, because we see each other every day. But hey, if he wanted to work from home, he could very easily. We would hate to have someone, backdoor in like that while he was working home. So that's part of it. So yeah, and at the schools particularly with remote learning and everything. So that would be things we'll be looking at.
Right. Health services is on there.
Yeah, I mean, health services, it's certainly the ongoing, what you would think of the pandemic, right? The treating the actual coronavirus. But I think what we are seeing, we know what we're seeing is particularly in our students and our children, we're seeing, they need some emotional support after what happened for the last 21 months. All of a sudden they're back in a classroom situation, and, Wakefield's done pretty well, but you can see it around the state. Is people having trouble? How do they act? How do they intertwine?
Right. Their social skills.
Really have
kind of dropped because of lack of contact.
Exactly. And frankly, you're seeing the increase now, or at least being reported here now. People that were hunkered down together. There's some issues, right? So hopefully we can help people work through that. And people that are just anxious about everything in the world right now. And we are seeing, heightened levels of anxiety, which are leading to heightened levels of opioid use and alcohol use. And there are ways that we can use this, So part of what we did actually was we funded more hours for our clinician. For our recovery coach, for the social workers that we have on staff. That may be something that we're going to increase, and we actually kind of knew this was coming. This was signed in March, right? So we knew it was coming.
Yes.
So actually, some of that's already been built into our budget as using this for the next year, probably about $400,000. So that's been a big issue.
The police, fire, and public safety. I'm gonna jump ahead to that one, only because we just went through a concerted debate over the additional costs that have
Right.
come down the pike on the work on the police side of the building. I'm sure there's going to be someone out there who will ask, can this money be used for that instead of what we voted?
Well, I do think that we can certainly look, when you look at how the public safety building is being reconfigured, particularly on the police side, we talk about not having spaces where there can, private spaces where there can be the domestic interviews, right? There are spaces, where there aren't private intakes. I do think that we can probably look at some of those costs, which is a drop in the bucket when you look at the whole scheme of things. Some of that, we could look at some of that there. Kind of holding that back personally as a little bit of an ace in the hole, because it's not going to be $8 million, obviously, but it might take the edge off a little bit. If prices continue to escalate, we're going with our best bet, on the estimates right now. You don't know until it's built, frankly. And, we've already suffered, the real increased costs from delay on this. And so hopefully, but there is a little bit of an assistance there. I think there would be.
School or educational services?
Tremendous learning loss. There is talk to the superintendent about this. There is no doubt in my mind that, and it's empirical too, that there has been a learning loss. And it's particularly, when you look at the reading and math comprehension, with a lot of students, via the MCAS, how kids did that did all of third grade remote versus who didn't, who did a hybrid, but the scores are down. Okay, because you didn't have that, interaction in that instruction, much better that instruction every day. So
It's very hard to do school effectively over Zoom.
Constantly, at particularly at certain ages. I think probably a high school chemistry class you probably could, to a certain extent. But kids, grammar school, middle school, reading and comprehension and things like that, a little bit tougher. So that's so addressing that learning loss might be, extra classes, might be more summer classes, things like that. And we actually again, kind of squirreled some money away in this budget, about $400,000 for the school. So it's that's already embedded in here, because again, when we set the budget, we were nervous, right? Came in better than we thought. And we accounted for this because we knew when this was signed in March, and we knew that would be a definite potential. But
Sure.
we're still looking at $7 million that we haven't really touched yet, or 7.5.
And then the other allowable use here is assistance to households, small businesses, and nonprofits.
Right.
Small businesses, obviously the restaurants took a major hit.
Yeah, as
during
did
this
any
pandemic.
service industry. Okay,
Yeah.
and a lot of them went through the payment protection plan and did that and kept people on payroll. But starting back up, helping them get over the hump now, because that money's gone. Maybe helping them find ways to better market in a new era. Reaching more people, setting up their store differently. Things like that. Digital, created digital marketing. We put on a digital marketing seminar, I guess, during the pandemic, and we had people from all over the country that joined this, which was great, and a lot of places in Wakefield, because there was a whole different dynamic for some of them that didn't have to do this before. So, again, those are things we're looking at. Nonprofits. When you think about the food pantry, you think about the Boys and Girls Club, well known in Wakefield, but they still weren't able to have their big events that they did before,
Right.
And your other
Or,
locals.
or even their full capacity usage
Correct.
that they had before.
Correct.
And
Correct.
again, the kids lost on the social
Right.
dynamic there too.
So, that's an area that we would be looking at. And it is kind of funny because the federal government, isn't, under the CARES Act, we could run the exact scenario by. Listen, I'm very fearful at Town Hall right now. We do not have a backup generator. And, you know what, if everything goes down at town hall, this is really a lifeline for people, for services. It's all done remote. You know, we would like to spend $50,000 on a generator. Yeah, that sounds like a great use for the CARES Act. You know, let me approve it. And you go right to the head of audit and finance. Boom, it's approved. Federal's a little bit different. Okay, so federal kind of, I go to all these webinars and what have you, and everyone gives you a little bit of a different answer. So, you know, I know that in education, you know, summer education and enrichment is going to be covered. Anything for learning loss. I know in recreation, summer camps could be covered, you know, getting the kids back out there. Particularly if I can look at qualified census tracts, whether it's, you know, higher minority population, higher women-owned business and things like that would certainly help us out. But I don't know all the time, so you go through and you read these pages and pages from the federal government, and they come up with about, you know, and to support outdoor spaces for COVID-19 mitigation. How does that fit in? Like we talked about that, right?
Right.
Example, restaurant patios improvements to the built environment of the neighborhood, like facade improvements. So I could even say, all right, here's a neighborhood that was hit, you know, because they're women-owned businesses, service businesses. Geez, a lot of them could use new facades. Could we put some money aside for that from ARPA? It appears yes. Yes. Okay. Sounds good to me. Parks, public plazas, and other outdoor recreational spaces. Again, they promote healthier living environments, outdoor recreation, and socialization, which was missing during this whole thing.
Right.
We can certainly do it. But it's a little bit more nebulous here than it was in getting pre-approved, spending it, and getting reimbursed. But I will tell you, at the end of the day, at all these webinars that I'm going to, you know, one of them said, you know, at the close, and this was a lot of other managers like myself, you know, guys, if you spend it on anything that's kind of remotely on the list, you're probably going to be fine. I don't think the federal government's going to come back and claw it back.
Right.
The only way they will claw it back, and they're very specific in here, you can't spend it on pension obligations or pre-existing bond obligations, which we obviously wouldn't.
Right. Which have more or less been covered in the way that the town has budgeted anyway,
Correct. Absolutely correct. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I would never say we're gonna. You know, we had. No, you brought up the police station. We're pretty well covered in that, but we are covered in that. And I would never say, well, you know, no one got up in town meeting and say, hey, we're going to use the ARPA funds. Don't worry about it. No, because that wasn't the case. That's why we went and actually bonded it,
Right.
because that was within the guidelines.
So we will see this develop as the money becomes
Right.
available and as the
Right.
projects come available. And we'll probably talk about this in more detail as these things start to
Right.
congeal.
Yeah, I think what we will do is, I know what we will do is we are going to really try to have, and again, these are harder because we're still in, you know,
It's still early.
still early in this,
It
but
may
it's,
have been signed in March,
Right.
but everything's finally coming to the working
oh
part
yeah,
of
it
it
was signed in
now.
March, but we didn't get the first amount of this until September.
Yeah.
So, but we will have a lot of public input, because we do want to hear from the community on this. There will be some sort of a webinar, at least between now and the new year, you know, somewhere in the middle of December. We don't want to get too close to the holidays,
Right.
you know, because people just have other things to do. We also plan to have kind of a, you know, a suggestion box, you know, for lack of a better, you know, whether either in writing or electronically, of what you can look at. And I think a lot of these, you know, when we've been to a lot of these webinars on different aspects of Wakefield, it certainly has been talked about. You know, so we'll see that. It'll go back to the town council, finance committee, school committee, you know, but we really want to hear from the public on this. So stay tuned. There's going to be something coming out there. You know, here we are, November 18th today? No, 17th. 17th today. And I would say within a week, we're going to have some ways that you and the public can engage, and then really a larger meeting where you can engage in, you know, within a month, I would say. So we can really kind of get some ideas and then map out a plan. We certainly we don't want to spend it on the wrong thing, because this may be a once in a lifetime chance to do something that's transformative. And we certainly don't want to spend it too quickly only to find that, hey, more federal money came in. We could have doubled up on this. So
Right.
we'll have to, it's an exciting time. It's a good problem to have, I guess.
Careful
Other than the
planning.
other way.
Careful planning.
Careful planning, yeah.
So,
You know, and I would say most of the communities around us are kind of taking that a cautious approach on this.
The same approach.
Same approach.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think that's prudent, particularly where, you know, like I said, we don't know where the infrastructure bill's going to go. We don't know if the Build Back America plan comes through in some form, what's going to be there. So, you know, let's kind of let the dust settle a little bit. We have 3 years, and during this time, we can plan and put things together.
And there's still a lot of things that are just kind of, they could go one way or the other,
Yeah,
you know, over the next year.
yeah, exactly,
So,
exactly.
thank you, Steve.
Thank you. I know they get a little dry when we do these money shows, but that's okay.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.